This is Conversations with Women in Sales, an award-winning podcast created by Barbara Giamanco, who hosted the first 67 episodes. Listen to interviews with amazing women about their journeys in their sales careers, often discussing sales leadership tips, ideas, and strategies. We aim to inspire women to consider a sales career and for some women to grow into sales leadership. Men, we appreciate your allyship. And now, your host, Lori Richardson.
I'm really excited about today because I'm here with Dan Goodman, who is the founder and CEO of a company called True Commish. And Dan is really an advocate for employees. He's one of our big male allies as well. He's shared with me a lot of stories about women who have been really screwed over by their companies in terms of their commission and just comp in general. So, Dan, I want to welcome you here. I'm so happy that you took some time out to talk with us.
Thank you very much, Lori. It's a pleasure to be here. And I am a big advocate of all employees, but especially women in sales. I think that they've really had a big hill to climb up. I think that the boys club has been around for a long time, and that women have been trying to break that down for decades and decades. And if I can be an advocate in any way to help that, I'm all for it.
Yeah. And I have a real soft spot for that because I went into sales intentionally to make the same money as my male counterparts because I knew with commission it would be the same, but I had no idea in my early 20s that I could negotiate my salary. So I got screwed over right from the start. And I worked with male peers that had no more experience than I did, and they made more money than me. And I was a single mom. And so, it's important. And even today, if, someone offers me to do something as an influencer or whatever, I'll say, well, are the guys that are doing it, are they getting paid? Because I want to know, I'm not going to I don't want that to happen again. And I guess people figure if you don't ask, it's your own fault. So, I'm not sure about that, but you have shared a number of stories, particularly about women, at least that I've seen, but a lot of people that give us an idea of some of the things that you're seeing out there.
Yeah, it's across the gamut, honestly. Right now the big ticket is severance. I've helped probably 50, 60 people with their severance agreements since January 31st, doing this consulting business on the side that has emerged that I never planned to. My dream has been to provide a commission audit service to sales reps so that they can have pay transparency and no longer doubt or wonder if they're being paid right, and be able to, arm them with the data and the information to actually go back to their employer, not just say, hey, I don't think I'm paid right. Be able to allow them to show the specific deal and the dollar amount that they've been underpaid, and then have them respond to that. So that's kind of, a passion of mine to kind of bring this transparency, but it's really not just about commissions. It's about encouraging people to stand up for themselves, to not have doubt, to not have regret, to not feel bullied or intimidated to do so. I think that everyone deserves transparency in their lives, and they certainly deserve it around their pay. And people should be treated fairly and equally. If there's precedent set, then you should be treated based on how people have been previously. And if they haven't been, then you should call it out, demand to be treated well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know severance has been a hot topic lately because of so many layoffs, but an ongoing reoccurring issue. And you've been in comp since 2002 or something, I think, my notes.
Before that even.
Yes, before that even. And, the big one is, all of a sudden the sales rep closes a huge deal and the company's like, oh, we're not going to pay that.
Yep.
Even though we agreed to do it at the beginning, we're going to pay them less. And I've been through that in different companies where they're like, well, we want to negotiate. It's just way too much to give you the full amount. And I've always felt that, if the salesperson's closing the big deals, the company is doing great. So it benefits everybody to pay salespeople. But you've seen this time and time again, haven't you?
Yeah, the old windfall waterfall clause is a hot topic for me. I've been exposed to it going back 30 years, and it's ridiculous. The employer creates the comp plan. They spend months and months creating it. They roll it out months and months late. They've designed it. They're publishing it. They make us agree to it. They make us sign it. And then they can just change it anytime they want. And they can invoke whatever reason they want. A bluebird or a windfall is when you're not working 6 or 9 months for it, right? If you're a rep and you're working 9 months to close a big deal, it just happens to be very lucrative and large. You worked hard for that. You should be paid on it. And, the company is making anywhere between 80 to 90% of the revenue brought in. The rep is getting maybe 10 to 15 to 20% of that. I mean, the bigger the deal, the more everyone makes.
Yeah.
But if you create such a crappy comp plan that you can't live with it, well, then maybe you should have to live with it. And maybe you'll create a better plan next year. Taking the money from reps who worked really hard on a plan that you published and they signed off on, you should honor it. And frankly, it should be a legal binding contract that a rep should be able to go back, find relief from.
Is it not a legal binding contract?
A great point, Lori. I did a post about this a couple of weeks ago. And in order for something to be a legal binding contract, if there's any changes to it, it would require both parties' signature and approval. And that's not happening anywhere. Companies are randomly making changes to comp plans mid-year, multiple times a year. I just had multiple calls today from people complaining about that, wanting to know what they can do about it. If you live in the state of California, retroactive comp plan changes are illegal, and you can actually go seek relief from the labor department there. I think that I would really love to see consistent federal laws across the nation, rather than depending on which state you happen to live in will depend on how much you can get screwed or not.
Yeah. And you never find out until, till it's time for the payout, I guess, till the deal closes. And then I've been in those where he called in for a meeting and like, oh, we got to tell you that we did make this change. And on the big deals, we have to, of course, we have to get less comp. It just makes sense. And, I've been in those meetings.
It doesn't make sense. That's what's called bullying and intimidating. You're sitting there with someone from legal, HR, the CFO, the CRO, and you're sitting there by yourself with 5 people staring you down, telling you how it is and what will be good for you. Yeah.
So you advocate to speak up, even at, what might happen, right? You're definitely going to be labeled difficult.
Yeah, no, I say speak up no matter what. I even had an idea recently. I put it on a comment on one of my posts, and it's a little bit of a high wire to walk here. But if I'm a rep and I'm a secure rep and I'm confident in myself and I've been successfully selling for 10 years and know that I can take my deals somewhere else at any point, if I've got a huge deal coming down the pipe and I'm worried that they may invoke something, I would go to my management ahead of time, months before it closes, and say, I've got this deal coming, and it looks like it's going to be worth this much. And based on the comp plan that you've created, I'm expecting to be paid this much. Now, I'd like to get something in writing from you that you're going to honor the existing plan that you have. And then I'm going to go forward and close this deal. And if they don't, maybe I want to go talk to my customer and kind of let them know what kind of goes on here. And that I may not even be in the seat to close the deal.
That's very interesting. In my early days, my early 20s, it was my second corporate job, field sales. And I was working with a guy named Ron, who we worked the Boeing account. And so we sold millions of dollars to Boeing of technology products every month. He sold, bigger stuff, computers, and I sold printers and all sorts of peripherals and things like that. And then Ron left, and then Ted came on. And so it was interesting because I would be the senior rep since I'd been there longer than Ron or than Ted, who came on. And what was interesting was that at some point, the company started scrutinizing dollars and kind of looking at things. And they realized, we can only afford one rep on the Boeing account. And they took me off. And they said, well, Ted's, and they said illegal things like, well, we know you're a single parent and, you can't really travel like Ted can. And I mean, I'm not kidding. And when I said a couple of things like, that's illegal, even way back then, like you can't say that to people, then it all changed. And then they said, well, we didn't want to hurt your feelings, but Boeing really wanted to work with Ted and not you. And I'm like, oh, really? So
I doubt it. So you make a really good point. So it's kind of like my analogy, like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, did it really fall? Yeah. So if an employer treats you illegally and you do nothing about it, is it really illegal?
Right. Isn't that it?
I mean, and this is the problem with society, Lori. Everybody there's this unbalanced relationship or imbalance, I guess, relationship that people allow to happen in society. So they take like doctors and lawyers and religious figures and employers, and they put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And they don't question them. And they view them as higher up than they are. And this is where people can be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
They're human beings just like you and I. They put their pants on one leg at a time.
Yeah.
So, why is it like from a pay perspective that the CEO or the CRO can have true visibility and know exactly how much they're going to earn? But if I'm a rep out there in the front lines, working my butt off, trying to close deals for the company, and I have no idea if I'm going to be paid fully or accurately. And the system is intentionally set up that way. It's insane that salespeople are treated as second-class citizens. My good buddy Scott Leese put a post out there a long time ago referring to them as blue-collar workers in a white-collar world. And they really are treated that way. It's like when the shit hits the fan, pardon my French, when it hits the fan and they need to find an area to make up some shortfalls,
Right.
they go and look at who the top reps are and see what deals they've got in there and see, how much can we take from this rep and just throw it to the bottom line to achieve our goals. It's happening all the time.
Yeah. And in my case, I did talk to an attorney and they did say, it sounded like I had legal grounds to do something, but it was a small town. I didn't want to make a bad name. I'm in my early 20s. And so I took the business elsewhere. I left and went to a competitor. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, ultimately, the company, not having anything to do with me, they ultimately went out of business. And so it all worked out for me, but it was a really ugly thing that I'll never forget.
Yeah. And well, when you say I'll never forget, you're talking right about something I say. I talk about wage theft PTSD. It literally stays with you for a lifetime. I spoke to a guy about a month and a half ago. He had saw my post. They hit a nerve about wage theft. He reached out and said, "Hey, Dan, I'd love to tell you about my story." I said, "Okay, sure." And we talked and talked. He was so passionate about it. He had $60,000 stolen from him. He didn't pursue it at the time.
Wow.
And he's talking like it happened last week and it was 13 years earlier.
Yeah.
He's been carrying that around for 13 years.
Yeah.
And, and the way that you can overcome it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a successful outcome. The reason you carry this wage theft PTSD is because you don't stand up and fight back.
Right.
You allow them to take advantage of you. You allow them to bully and intimidate you. And then when you look back 5 years later, when you had more of the guts to do something about it, now you regret that you didn't do it then. So I always encourage people, even if they don't think they're going to have a successful outcome, for their own mental health, for their own therapeutic standpoint, stand up and fight back and call out the behavior and let them know that you're aware of it and that you demand to be treated fairly, and make some threats about going to a lawyer or getting a demand letter or going to a labor department and put together a really strong write-up that shows what a compelling case you have and that you've already invested so much time to do so, because now they're going to think that you're actually going to follow through and take action. And that's when you'll have a successful outcome.
Yeah. What do you advise for people in finding out whether they're making the same pay as their colleagues? Like salary?
Yeah, I mean, that's a toughie. I mean, back in our day, it was like taboo to even talk about it. And, now there's different, places out there that, people are sharing salary information on various websites and things like that. I would talk to your colleagues. I mean, one of the reasons why employers get away with what they get away with is it's, the employer and all their money and resources and attorneys and leadership against you as a small individual.
Yeah.
If all of us, when folks come out with these horrible plans and they make these changes mid-year, you know what? If the whole sales team, revolted together and said, we're not selling another deal until you give us a decent plan, guess what? They're going to do it because they'll go out of business otherwise.
And years ago, I learned you shouldn't do it more than once a year. You shouldn't change comp more than once a year. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there are organizations that have, the bottom line is what I would say is put together a plan and stick to it. So if in advance, you're going to say we're rolling out a 6-month plan, we're going to roll out another 6-month plan afterwards. That's fine. If you want to make all that extra work for yourself and go through the cycles multiple times and do the whole thing, I think it's crazy. But, the issue is when you have a plan in place and then you unexpectedly change it for no reason other than to reduce the rep's pay off the plan that you published in the first place.
Yeah.
So Laura, I want to bring up a topic that I think will be near and dear to you.
Okay.
And that is pregnancy with women in sales.
Yeah.
I have written about it multiple times. I've got 2 or 3 active customers that I'm working with right now about this. And I've got another 2 or 3 folks that have reached out and shared their stories. And this is all just in the last little bit. And I'm just one individual.
Yeah.
So I put out a post a while ago. A woman had reached out, or fiance had reached out, and she had been asking about the maternity policy at her private equity firm that she was working at. So it's a small place, but lots of money. All men there, right?
Yeah.
And she had asked about that policy more than a half a dozen times for 2 months. And then finally at 7+ months pregnant, It is. She went into the CEO's office. She was told that they're going to tell her what the policy is. They told her the policy and they fired her on the spot and were told her that she's got a month's severance. She went home crying, upset, shocked, horrified. Her fiance was ready to crack some heads over there.
Isn't it
He reached out
illegal
to
to fire a pregnant woman?
Absolutely. But again, when I said a little while ago, it's only illegal if you do something about it, right?
Right.
So he reached out to me because he knew about, what I share about online and when I talk about and how I help. He shared the story with me.
Yeah.
He went back with some help and went back to the company with her, and she ended up getting 9 months severance and 12 months COBRA, and they were happy with that, and then walked away to go have the baby. They sent me a DM with a picture of the birth this past Sunday.
Wow, that's so nice.
On top of it was a screen with a link to the post I had put out about it.
Wow, that is so great.
So,
But
yeah, it brings it to like real life. It really meant an enormous amount to me. And then here's what's going on though in general. I got 3 or 4 of the same stories. That one I just told you was
it's
unique.
the
It was so
commission
horrific.
of the issue. It's
Well, in this case, it wasn't. In this case, it
isn't
wasn't.
this one, but normally
it-
it's a
it's
sales issue, and it hasn't been figured out in a lot of younger companies because they haven't had women out on maternity leave, or they just have, it's just not a good policy because if you're selling, you need to ramp down and you need to be able to ramp back up without it starting from scratch.
Yeah, you're literally talking about the point that I was just about to make, that there's literally 3 or 4 or 5 women that I have spoken to in the last 2 months, including a couple that I'm actively working with, who have gone on maternity leave, had their baby, came back, within 4 weeks was put on a PIP, and within 4 weeks after that was fired. They're literally targeting women because they think that they're going to be distracted from the new child at home because their hormones or body chemistry has changed and they don't have the same gumption that they may have had before. Who knows? But what they're doing is just so illegal and so wrong. And then they're dressing it up as bad performance to hide the bad behavior.
Wow.
And these women are coming to me and they're like shell shocked and they're hurt and they're upset. And they've been treated so wrongly. And most just kind of take it and go away and don't know what to do. And what I do is I provide this framework to write out exactly everything that happened. It's a very therapeutic process for you to document your feelings and your experience and how you've been treated. And it's also very helpful to talk about yourself as a person and your accomplishments and your values and qualities and morals and ethics. Then you put that in context of what happened to you. How did you come to the company? Were you heavily recruited in and left a good job? Why were you being let go? What is the reason that they're stating that you let go? And then defend that and provide the real reason why you actually think you're being let go, which is often very different.
Yeah.
And what are they offering as your severance? And state why that's unfair and not representative of your situation, what's happened, the current job market, or precedent, right? And then it's a 10-step process, and you create this really strong document that puts the employer on alert, like, hey, Lori's actually going to take action here. She's invested the time to create this document. She's laid out the entire scenario here. It's a very strong case that she's stating here. We don't look very good. Maybe we should just go do the right thing by her and take care of this instead of what might be otherwise.
Yeah. And you help people do this.
I've done this for about 85 customers since January 31st. I've had more than 15 people that have doubled their severance, increased it by more than $10,000. I just helped CRO. He got $375,000 in severance.
Wow.
And another CRO that I just worked with that increased their severance from $15K payout to $85,000.
Yeah, severance is something, just like if you have a partner in business, like you never think you're going to split up and you never think you're going to leave the company. It's such a great opportunity. And you have to think about these things in advance. And you have to, if you had a good, solid severance plan in place when you start, it's not an issue later, right?
Well, Lori, you're like playing the violin for me over here. You're talking music to me here. I have always tell people 2 things. Before you start, plan your exit. Okay. So once they've made the offer to you, right, go back to them and say, okay, well, I would like to negotiate and see what would happen. When it comes time for me to leave, what is that going to look like? What's going to happen to my variable compensation? I want you to go and set this employment agreement up in such a way that they can't terminate you to save paying you out $100,000 commission and taking it to the bottom line and firing you without cause. If you added clauses to your contract that said things like, upon termination, I'm going to be paid out on all book deals for the next 90 or 180 days. Or if you're paid on bookings, then you're going to get paid out on that. If you're paid out in collections, so you can add terminology to your contract. You only have leverage when they're recruiting you, when they want you. Once you're in, it all changes. You're now with everybody else.
Right.
You can create your own comp plan if you're that much in demand. If you're a top rep and you're killing it, and they're going to take 80% of what you bring in for themselves, you can create your own comp plan. You can create terms in your employment agreement that will take precedence over next year's comp plan.
Yeah.
So you'll be the one who has an exception on how the comp plan is being treated and enforced against the sales team.
Yeah.
These are all things that I tell people to do. And the other thing I tell them to do is make believe that tomorrow when you get to work, that you're going to be fired, walked out the door, and shut out from all your systems. So gather up all the information that you want today to go back to your employer and fight for that wrongful termination, or to fight for higher severance, or to make a case that'll be better for the company to take care of you on the way out, because, you've got this case and the evidence and facts to back it up. So go in there and gather up all of your information, your comp plan, your employment agreement. If you've been put on a PIP, if you've got all of your bookings information, your commission information, so that you can prove how much is owed to you upon termination rather than having to hope to do it through a lawyer in discovery.
And so if I'm talking about severance at the beginning of this relationship and they're saying, oh, come on, Lori, you're just, we would never do that to you, or we would never.
Well, if you would never do that to me, then you would have no reason to not want to include this clause in the contract. Well, Lori, you bring up another point, the way you just worded that. And I really need to get this off of my chest. This is a horrible thing that's happening right now. So I'm going to come over here, Lori, and I'm going to recruit you out of a job that you've worked there for 6 years. You're a rock star. You're well respected. But, I'm going to offer you a managerial role or a VP role that you're not going to get at your current place. So I'm going to send you an employment letter. And I'm going to tell you all about what the offer and the package is going to look like verbally during the interview process. And then I'm going to send you the letter, and you're going to look at it. You're going to sign it. You're going to resign from your previous job because you've got a signed employment letter. Now you're going to come into the company, and now all of a sudden we're going to give you your employment contract to sign. And now all of a sudden we're going to give you your comp plan to sign. And there's a whole bunch of things that's different in those documents than what I verbally shared with you. And you know what? We're not going to change it to what you claim we told you verbally. And you don't have a place to go back to because you've already resigned from your previous job. I've literally heard this scenario play out 3 times in the last 2 months with people.
Wow. So you need to get that all done ahead.
You know what they say? Hey, Lori, we got the employment contract, come on in. Together, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out your MBOs. We'll get the stock plan to you. We'll figure out the comp plan. And then you've been there for 2 months. You've asked 8 times for the plan. You still don't have one. Okay. Or the equity that was promised to you. You've come to find out that, while there's a vesting schedule for tenure, there's also a vesting schedule regarding when a transaction takes place and the change of hands of ownership takes place. I reviewed a contract for someone a few weeks ago, and I put a post about this as well, and they didn't catch it themselves. They didn't catch it themselves. They thought it was all set. It said that it had the normal vesting schedule, 1 year cliff, 3 year monthly after that. But it said if you're not employed at the time of the transaction, regardless of whether you're fully vested for duration, you have no equity. So it's a lifelong contract to work there if you want equity. And they don't share this. They don't tell you this. You got to find it buried in that paragraph on page 4 on the 8th line of a 16-line paragraph written in legalese.
So if somebody's working on a big move and, there's a lot of questions, hire Dan or talk to somebody like Dan. I don't know anybody like you though, Dan. You're the only one I know that cares so much, and you share these stories, and they definitely should follow you on LinkedIn, right? Because you're sharing some really great stories and
every day
telling the truth. And, it may not be pretty to all the employers, but do you ever have employers say, hey, man, stop?
Well, actually, I can give you 2 quick stories about that. I had an HR person come on to my post once, and I had at the time I was doing I still am doing the true commission thing, and I'm like the commission guru, the chief commission officer. So someone suggested the chief commission officer title. So I had some fun with it and put it out there for a while. I just changed it recently. So she said, anyone who refers to themselves as the chief commission officer on LinkedIn should never be trusted or taken seriously. Don't listen to anything he's saying. She was the head of HR. So I went back and let everyone know like what was her motivation, what was driving that. Because basically I am the counter to human resources.
Yeah.
I'm the one who's out there telling everybody how it actually works, while the companies in HR have been getting away with this crap for years because no one knows how it works. It's a secret. The company has lawyers and HR people and all these people that they spent, with all these years of experience. You've never gone through this. You have no training. You're not a lawyer. All the legal documents are written to support the company, not you. You've
Yeah.
got no one aligned with you. And you're expected to sign legal documents that have ramifications and do it blindly. It's so unfair and so one-sided.
Yeah.
So yes, I have had that a little bit.
Unfortunately, in HR, I've also seen women going in to talk about sexual harassment and not being supported. And so I have to agree with you on HR. It's not always there to help you.
Lori, you mentioned that. I was working with a client who was brutally raped and had massive mental issues and could not go back to work right away, was put on a mental leave break. They fired her on mental leave from the assault.
Wow.
So she engaged with me. I said, you know what? Your case is so serious and significant. I refunded her the money she gave me.
Wow.
And we found her an attorney that would take it for pro bono for her.
Oh,
And she ended up getting taken care of. And it didn't
Wow.
cost her anything.
That's horrific.
I'm literally getting emotional just talking about this right now. Because it was such a horrific situation. And it's kind of bringing those feelings back when I was talking to her on the phone.
And I have heard both men and women tell me these stories about women that have gone into HR. One was a college professor that actually has a sales program that placed students in companies. And even with that strong relationship, when the young woman went into HR, they questioned her and, wondered if she really was hearing things correctly. And I'm just, HR, you got to do better. You got to do better than that.
No, I think what we need to do is that we need to identify what HR really is. Because what they do is they trick folks. It's kind of almost deceitful. If everyone just knew what HR's function was, HR works for leadership. Their job is to protect the company and the company's interest, first and foremost, under any circumstance. And it's in the rare case that you might find that 1 in a million HR person that will actually go to bat for the employee against the CEO or leadership, they're fired within a few weeks of doing that. Every time. I've spoken to HR leaderships have told me that.
In my career, I did have one corporate leader. His name was Larry Begley. He's retired now. He was his CFO and he oversaw HR and he built empowered HR teams. And it was the first time I'd ever that was even possible. And so tip of the hat to Larry.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry. Lori, I've got 4 people that have reached out to me that have been terminated by their employer in the last month and a half after filling out an anonymous survey.
Really?
Yes. Well, it's an anonymous survey that has their security login. So they know who filled it out if they want to check. And these same people are sharing real experiences and feelings, being told that it's anonymous with no repercussions, somehow being terminated within a few weeks of those surveys being filled out.
Wow.
Not once. It wasn't an outlier one time. 3 different people with a similar story at different companies.
So words of advice.
Words of advice. Have your antenna up. Do not have blind faith and trust. Seek out places where you think that negative things could potentially happen. Read my stories. They'll tell you what to look out for. I'm not telling you to sit there and say, and I'm not saying that every employer is bad. In fact, the majority of employers are likely good. It's those ones that aren't that you need to be aware of. And, they may appear to be family to you right now. They never are. Don't get sucked into that. When the poop hits the fan, they're going to abandon you and you'll be the first that they look to cut. You'll be left on your own. They're no longer family. Set yourself up for success. Have your eyes wide open. Plan everything in advance. Anticipate bad things that can happen and plan ahead to try to avoid them or minimize their impact if you can avoid them. Those are the big things. Don't be bullied and intimidated. The reason why folks get away with this stuff is because you allow them to do it. Stand up to it. And when it comes to severance, they will not pull an offer because you want to negotiate it. Okay. Just because you want to negotiate, they don't offer it because they're nice. Right. They offer it because they benefit greatly from it, more so than what they're offering. One more thing I want to say quickly, and I didn't realize this before. Maybe it's a coincidence. But if I've had 15 or 20 people recently that got better severance payouts, some reason they all doubled. You know what that tells me, Lori?
What?
It tells me that when they make the offer, they're offering half of what they're willing to pay.
Oh, wow.
And that 80% of the employees don't bother to contest or fight or ask or negotiate.
Right.
So therefore, they've got no problem offering to the 20% that actually do go make a case for it, giving it because the other 80% just let it go. And it's half of what they were willing to do in the first place.
Well,
And I've literally had a dozen different reps or employees literally exactly double their severance.
wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a societal thing for women because I've had many conversations with hiring managers who said, in fact, I'm thinking of one specifically, we hired 6 men and 5 women. All the men asked to negotiate their contract. None of the women did. And so it's not because we're dumb, or whatever. It's because we didn't know we could do it in many cases. I mean, I think that's mostly that. Yeah.
No, I disagree. I think it's a societal issue. I think that both men and women equally don't know that they can negotiate, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I think that women have been raised going back into the 70s and 80s and 90s. Hopefully now it's changing a bit. We're both older, so we, maybe don't know, but I think it's a societal issue that women have been taught to be a certain way and to be raised a certain way and to not question things. The same thing with math, this whole stigma with math, right?
Yeah.
Right? And that's what the issue is, and we need to change that.
Yeah. And I have heard where a woman said, I didn't fight for the pay because I wanted the flexibility of the hours because I was a new mom or something. And they could have had both. And they found out later, that they missed out on that.
Well, they could have had both, or actually they get neither. Right?
Yeah, right. Or neither. Yeah, that's right. So, oh, that's great. Well, everybody should connect with Dan on LinkedIn. It's Dan Goodman, Tree Commish. Thank you so much. Well, maybe we'll have another one of these down the road. Hopefully not. I mean, I'd like to think that your job will be eliminated, but I know that's not going to happen anytime soon. And
it'd be my pleasure to come back on anytime, Lori. I appreciate the time and, providing the audience here to share my views and thoughts. And I'm just here for the people. I've been watching this go on for too long. It's a frustrating thing. And I'm taking the initiative to kind of step up and be that resource and that advocate for folks. And, hit me up. I'm passionate about helping people.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Dan Goodman. We'll be watching you on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conversations with Women in Sales. You can find all of our episodes at womensalespros.com/podcast. Help us spread the word and let's change the face of B2B sales.